all in hopes, one, you are able to ask me any questions I'm able to answer and to alleviate, any issues or things that we need to get clarified or cleared up for the city of New Orleans at the end of the day, for our residents and even our visitors. But this morning, I'm joined with my director of the Orleans Parish Communications District, Mr. Tyrell Morris. He's joining me on this morning because, one, I am going to establish by executive order a violence crime reduction task force in which I have tapped Tyrell Morris to be the chair of this task force for the city of New Orleans. As you know, in the year of 2022, major cities across our country experienced a real increase in violent crime and also a reduction in the available law enforcement providers, agencies, if you will, to have the boots on the ground in regards to officers. So the city of New Orleans was again a part of one of those cities experiencing this firsthand. And so with the year of 2022 ending with over 260 homicides in our city, which was also the leading death of children in the city of New Orleans. And so with that, even moving into the year of 2023 has already been met with a significant increase in violent crime in our city, and even as it relates to touching young people in our community. When I served on the New Orleans City Council as a council member, I initiated an op-ed that landed in national press that violent crime is a public health threat and it is a public health epidemic. It's something that we're seeing firsthand in our community still. But it's taking that lens and that approach from a public health perspective, and even learning lessons from how we approached COVID-19 in our community with that task force that I stood up at that time. So much like that, I'm standing up a violent crime reduction task force, again by executive order, and it will be under the command of Executive Director Tyrell Morris, as I mentioned. The task force will be laser focused on preventing violent crime in our city, as well as enforcement partners to remove the most violent offenders from our streets. We know that it is a system, a criminal justice system, that has to act together and work together in a collaborative manner to not only make New Orleans safe, but to keep her safe. And so it is the intention through this task force that we'll have just an extra layer of accountability relative to our enforcement partners, again, to remove the most violent offenders from the streets of New Orleans and keeping them off of our streets, and ensuring that those impacted by violence have the supportive services that they need and when they need them. Director Morris is a certified public safety executive. I've learned this firsthand as he has been embedded in my public safety team since I've served as mayor of the city of New Orleans. He has led the OPCD, that's our 911, 311, Orleans Parish Communications District, and again, my public safety team through many emergencies, events, and significant technology and operational improvements. One of the hallmarks, I would say, under my administration, when I meet with my public safety officials, we meet as a team. And we meet not only to hear challenges or issues each agency may be facing, but it's also for us to troubleshoot, work together collaboratively to solve problems that agencies are experiencing, but at the end of the day, the city is collectively experiencing, and we're wanting to do all that we can to turn things around. And we do that in the form of collaboration and, again, meeting as a team every week. nonstop. It's proven to be the best effective method that I've seen deployed, as this administration has responded to over 15 plus emergency declarations in our city. Director Morris is known for bringing stakeholders together, again, from many different segments in our city, throughout our community and government, uniting all forces towards a common goal. And this is something that the task force, again, will be charged with doing. The task force will be engaged every hour, every day. Much like with fighting COVID-19, we had a war room that was activated, a war room that we leaned on for data and for metrics and in real time, that really guided me in decision making and the leaders that I depended on to help make the best decisions for this city, keeping her safe. We're going to act again in that same vein, but with a target. So starting off 60-day mark, hitting it hard every day, as I mentioned, but that target 60-day, being able to tell you the impacts that we're making as we move towards the 60-day, but truly that 60-day mark, being able to back it up with data, what's worked, what hasn't, how do we tweak, how do we move forward, what did we digress in, what do we move forward, but just a roadmap that charts our course every single day, because it's going to take this laser approach, this laser focused approach. And I cannot think of a better time to stand up such a task force, because it is truly aligned with how you've seen us work very hard to garner resources from the American Rescue Plan, getting those dollars in the door, making sure that we're allocating those dollars across the board, being very strategic in where those dollars are placed, prioritizing those dollars to not only basic city services, but enhancing those services, quality of life issues across the board. And we do see that if we focus in a unified manner, in a collaborative and in a holistic manner, we believe that we will be able to reduce violent crime in our city and improve the overall quality of life in our city as well, with this war room, all hands on deck, built-in accountability, and measuring the effectiveness of our work every day. Again, I can't think of a better leader to be over this command, because Tyrell brings this to me as a leader of this city, but to our leadership as a whole, senior team. So Director Morris and task force members will work with senior leadership and agency directors to deploy resources, again, to aid NOPD in stopping incidents of violence, but also understanding that NOPD cannot do it alone, with keeping offenders off the street and making sure that justice truly does prevail. The task force will also meet with stakeholders, to include community groups and members of the New Orleans City Council as well, folding them into our task force, folding them into the work. This is about taking action. It's not about words. It's about doing the job. And we believe, again, now is the time, since we have allocated resources, since we've aligned them very well with what we know the needs are relative to quality of life in our community, as well as violent crime in the city as well. Members of the task force that I will share with you at this time are, of course, Executive Director Morris, Commissioner Stevens with our criminal justice coordination, very important. Our Superintendent, Michelle Woodford, no doubt about that. Our Health Director, Dr. Jennifer Avegno, again, public health lens, very important. Director Patrick Young, who leads my Office of Gun Violence Prevention, very key. Director John Thomas, Director of Public Safety and Homeland Security for the City of New Orleans. Deputy CAO Thomas Mulligan, he is over the Office of Business and External Services, all of those public facing agencies under his umbrella, code enforcement and the like, safety and permits and the like. But again, public facing, key departments relative to quality of life in our city. Director Asia Howlett with the Mayor's Office of Youth and Families. That will also be Ms. Ana Maria Villamarin Lupin, who is the Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of Youth and Families, and the city's official licensed clinical social worker that manages and supervises our social work internship partnership, where graduate students, they are assigned to the city of New Orleans for 1 year as they have to do their practicum to receive their master's. And so this program was stood up by the city and really was created and really birthed, I would say, under my leadership as a neighborhood leader in Broadmoor. President of the Orleans Parish School Board, Olin Parker. Also, our district attorney, Jason Williams, Chief Judge Robin Pittman, Chief Judge Renard Dansberg of our juvenile court, Director Gregory Joseph of communications, and of course, our consulting chief, Pachardo, Fausto Pachardo. Not limited to, but definitely key leaders on the task force, individuals that have decision-making authority. None of this, let me take it back, but really being able to, in the task force meetings and in real time, offer not only solutions, but as it relates to it, decisions, being able to make decisions to move the ball. Again, being very action-oriented in our approach. Superintendent Woodfork and I just remain closely committed to prioritizing initiatives such as this and programs, of course, to be innovative in our approach to apprehend, to prevent, and to intervene as it relates to violent crime incidents in our community and throughout the city of New Orleans. These are the tools that will ultimately lead, no doubt about it, to a safe, healthy, thriving, and productive city in the city of New Orleans. And so, listen, we're going to continue to be holistic. I will move forward with giving you updates and taking those questions from you, but just wanted to start right here. I'm going to ask Director Morris to come up, share a few words with you. We'll answer questions on this topic. He'll segue out, and we'll keep the press conference going if that's okay. So with that, thank you again, Director Morris.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership and your faith and trust in me to lead this task force. The city of New Orleans is indeed experiencing a violent crime spike, and the executive action taken today by the mayor is a bold move in our quest to curb the current trends. The task force priorities will be very simple. First being the prevention of acts of violence by embedding ourselves in community and orchestrating a full government response to detect, deter, and intervene before an act of violence happens. Our second priority will be to assist Chief Woodfork, the brave men and women of the New Orleans Police Department, and other law enforcement partners to apprehend violent offenders, which will include regularly evaluating internal policies, making legislative recommendations to the mayor and the city council, as well as removing any barrier between a need and a resource. Finally, we understand the long-term effects of those who have been impacted by violent crime. This includes the victim, the offender, and the families on both sides. We must treat this as a public health emergency, as our third priority will be to ensure comprehensive wraparound services are brought to bear to those who are impacted by violent crime. The task force will be active 24 hours a day, as New Orleans is a 24-hour city, and this issue requires our attention and action around the clock. The task force will also engage stakeholders in the community, as well as across all levels of government, to include the New Orleans City Council and members of the state and federal delegation. The task force will also provide public updates on activities and results. A word of warning to those offenders who do harm to our community. This task force will spare no resource or opportunity to bring you to justice. This is a phenomenal city with a bright future, and you will not derail our collective progress and prosperity. Finally, to Chief Woodfork and the heroes of the New Orleans Police Department, We understand the difficult challenges you are facing on the ground. The mayor, her administration, and all task force members have your back to serve both New Orleans and the people alongside of you. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so what we'll do now relative to the task force is just answer any questions that you may have. And what I need to do first is let me sign it, right, executive order. But while we're doing that, John, you can move us along.
Dan Myers with the Advocate, just about the task force for now.
Can you describe how this task force work will be different than what already exists in the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination?
Right, so this task force, a couple things. One, it will bring to bear various city departments, like I mentioned, Mr. Mulligan, over the Office of Business and External Services, all of those public-facing agencies relative to quality of life, also embedding other agencies relative to infrastructure, housing, health department, in a more concerted effort, much like we leaned on during COVID-19. So this will take on a shape kind of mirrored towards the task force that I stood up that really guided me in my decision making, but also resources that we now have to bear that have been targeted towards these various city departments to do more work on the ground. So the timing is just right for this because, again, with the additional American Rescue Plan dollars being activated, the budget being passed, and us now in 23, it will definitely be much more different than the coordinating council. But that is definitely work that will continue, especially, we're embarking upon a case management system that we're putting over $30 million towards building that system so that all systems talk. That will, again, hold us all accountable moving forward, these criminal justice system partners. Tyrell, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so of course,
Data.
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner Stevens and the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination does a phenomenal job every day making sure the public safety partners are in sync. As the mayor said, this particular issue is very focused. Violent crime requires a full government response, and it requires us to be innovative. This provides us a space to do that, to track it, to support the brave men and women, and to include the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination in the execution of their task. Again, as the mayor said, during the stimulus task force, it was a new approach. This is the same type of a task force, but as you mentioned, many agencies are part of the task force. You have the list, but this just to make sure we do not leave no stone unturned.
LBJ and then Robinson with Boxer.
Sure, along the same lines, Mayor and Chief, how does this differ from what's happening with VCADE? I know that's more of an enforcement thing in terms of inter-agency of using those. And the second point I had with that was to ask whether or not community members are going to be a part of the task force leadership as well.
Sure. So on the front end of that, VCADE is truly immersed within the New Orleans Police Department. This is not just taking a lens or just focusing on NOPD. This is a more of a holistic approach where the outside agencies have greater accountability and responsibility. But more importantly, it creates a table that individuals will be responsible for having a seat, and also decision making in real time, because we'll be responding to data sets that also change daily. And the deployment strategies that I know on the NOPD side, they're looking at data as well, but they will also be guiding, us along the way, so that there is a seamless approach, that we are aligned, and then we're just being very intentional about how we move. That will shift. It could be from day to day, week to week, but we will follow the data. And just some things or tactics that the police chief has put in forth over the past couple of days have just rendered great results. But I'll leave that for the superintendent to speak to that from an NOPD standpoint. But today, this is on the task force. Tyrell, anything to add?
I'll answer the question about community. The executive order requires the task force to engage community. As far as who was sitting at the table, the mayor gave you the reason behind the selection process, individuals that have resources under their command and can make decisions. I think community helps us shed light and give us detail and color in what's happening on the ground, so those making the decisions make the right decisions for those that are being impacted. So absolutely, community will be engaged and a part of our journey.
Right, but no community on the panel itself, on the
Not currently, but as the mayor said, we have to reimagine or re-engineer. But initially, we also have to understand that we often talk about classified information that is very sensitive to the operations, and we don't want to ever interfere in an investigation. And so it's intentional, but absolutely to ensure that those community members and other elected officials that have buy-in or have a stake in this are heard and have an opportunity to be a part of our process.
Madam Mayor, 260 murders last year. We're on with 12 so far this year, which we're on pace for 360 this year. A triple murder in Mid-City already this year. How will this task force take steps to try and solve that problem, to target Mid-City, which appears to be having a spike right now?
Right, so it's, first of all, it's to target where crime is occurring. So the data drives that. The data will continue to drive that. And deployment strategies relative to that will be deployed on the ground. Remember, NOPD, right? They will be in charge of that, but working in consultation with our task force. We're not taking over NOPD's job. We're ensuring that there's collaboration and a holistic approach, so when NOPD is doing their job, which they are in terms of apprehensions, arrests, and the like, we want to make sure that other systems are talking and being held accountable so that individuals who are arrested can continue to sit down, to stay off the street. And that takes a coordination of information and data sets and a level of accountability that I'm really trying to build with this task force.
WD issue and then WWL.
So last year we had a large number of people killed, over 700 people who were shot or killed by gunfire, thousands of cars broken into. Why are we waiting until now? We had the ARPA money last year.
Actually, no, we did not. The ARPA money that we had last year on the first tranche was one that filled our deficit. We had over $150 million deficit in the city of New Orleans. But not only that, I've brought to you time and time and time and time again, based on the resources that this city deployed relative to public safety, that we were not fully reimbursed at the state level, over $70 million that we were not reimbursed. So when you talk about waiting, we're still waiting for that. However, not waiting for pushing for a direct allocation, in which I did almost single-handedly for our city, that realized that money. But more importantly to that, getting that second allocation. That's what we're talking about now. So while we had that second allocation in 2022 towards the end, we had to go through a process, as you know. Went to the community, went through a budget process, passed a budget, went through a second process with the council, allocation, work with the departments. And so now is the perfect time because we've gone through that. We've built the foundation that we need to stand on now to fully execute. And when I talk about, and you heard the director talk about resources to bear, we took the time to make sure that we have the resources to bear. So this is the perfect timing to execute because, again, the resources are in a place where they were not before, in spite of your city, our city, not being fully reimbursed the $70 million. So we've had to work through it, work around it, and here we are with the largest fund balance that we've ever had in history, with a credit score that's solid, and with the foundation really to stand on relative to activating a task force such as this at this particular time.
I have a follow-up if you don't mind. Regarding the federal money, are we going to be requesting any federal help? Because they haven't repaid us, like you said, and we could use some help as NOPD is, small right now.
Sure. So if you just remind yourself that the city of New Orleans always, and especially given the events, activities, and the like, the hundreds of thousands, now the millions of visitors that come to our city, we're always advocating for and standing up a unified command relative to our law enforcement partners and agencies. You heard me talk about not long ago how I sat down not only with ATF leadership, with FBI leadership, asking for additional support so that we can deploy additional resources on the ground that helps NOPD make the arrests, issue those warrants and the like. A SEER 2, even as we prepare for Mardi Gras, continue to push for that. Had our SEER 2 meeting on yesterday in preparation. So this city, make no mistake about it, we're always putting our best foot forward and the advocacy needed and necessary to ask for and to attract leveraging additional law enforcement partners. We will not stop. We will not waver. Even you heard me recently talk about, I think that was on King's Day, talked about the incentives, the resources we're putting to bear to attract additional officers from around the country, really from around the state. I'm saying country because we've gotten a few outside of the state that are saying, we want to come to New Orleans, we want to come, but this is limited to the state of Louisiana, but it's working.
I know we have more questions on the task force, so last question about the task force to Mike Pearlstein, and then we can go into the other topics. So Mike.
Thank you. So how much did that letter from Councilwoman Moreno play in this task force she asked for? I think it was called a command unit in her letter to you. How much did that suggest?
I think I got that letter. I don't know. I think I responded to an email. I got the email, I think maybe Monday. What's today, Wednesday? Yeah. So because I checked it. Yesterday was Tuesday. Okay. Got to get it straight. So I did receive a correspondence from the council member via Andrew. I responded to that on yesterday saying thank you very much. And so what was really good about it, true alignment. We're doing the right thing. This is something that we've been working towards. And so if nothing else, it's full alignment. So I look forward to participation from the New Orleans City Council.
But I didn't see them directly on the panel. How are they involved?
Well, involved in regards to the task force, we'll be working with, as you heard me say, working with community as well as working with the New Orleans City Council.
Just to follow up on the previous question, the city had the highest per capita murder rate in the country for the bulk of the second half of last year.
I don't accept that because you're not factoring in the true weight of the city, meaning you're taking the 380 and you're not taking the full complement of who's in our city every single day.
New Orleans has far disproportionate amount of killing and violent crime. So how come this idea hasn't been treated as the emergency previously that you're treating it now?
So first of all, I believe that a holistic approach and a comprehensive approach is something that we've always deployed. But again, when you have the resources now that we didn't have to bear then, and when you have a real focus, really, again, wanting to put that major focus as it relates to violent crime and calling our partners to the table to work with the city, utilizing data in a way that we have not done before. You know that these other agencies, right, elected officials and the like, have a role to play. But creating a table, a task force, to where we're coming only focused on solving violent crime collectively, utilizing the data, making solid and sound decisions in real time, this is something that I believe is going to be different. Our approach is different. And we're setting the table and aligning it with resources. So we're really, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
If I could just follow up real quick with Mr. Morris, you mentioned being embedded in the community. I didn't see a direct sort of community member on the task force. You explained why, classified information and the like. But what do you mean by embedded in the community in ways that aren't already being done?
Well, first of all, it means, one, utilizing the data to determine where activity is happening. You mentioned Mid-City earlier, didn't you?
I didn't mention
Yeah, exactly. So when you're looking at data, one example, you're looking at data as you did, you focused on Mid-City, it then allows us to focus on community of Mid-City, those key neighborhood leaders on the ground in that particular community. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a neighborhood leader that we're used to knowing, but someone that maybe we have not touched before, but through our outreach methods or measures, we're able to garner that community voice in a way, again, that we haven't before. So it is a direct outreach approach. It is specific to data sets and community. I'm a community organizer on this one. I know how it works, done it, and I'm so excited about it. Director Morris.
Yeah, Mike. So when I say embedded, what I mean is that we are going to place ourselves, the task force members, in those communities. And we constantly, the administration's done a great job through the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Engagement, understanding what's happening with those leaders that have been in this position for a while. But as any criminal justice organization when everyone knows a little bit of something. And what we're trying to do is grab as many pieces of information together from many organizations to paint a puzzle, figure out what is happening and what needs to happen to stop the trend. So I say embedded, what I mean is meeting people where they are.
Amen. That's what we say all the time. And also, I would just have to say, it's been pretty refreshing. I think the community is ready for this. It's been really refreshing over the past couple of weeks how it just seems like the community members of the community are reaching out. It seems at larger scale numbers. They're just giving you information. It's something going on that's a good thing, and it just feels right. In our city. And I think as we ended that 2022 with the numbers, as you mentioned, the homicide numbers, even shootings in our community, I think it really sent a ripple effect throughout the community. And then pivoting towards 2023 with having leadership in place, looking towards public safety as a whole, something just feels different. And I believe the community is really ready for this type of intervention. And so I'm excited about it.
Ben Miser, the advocate, and then Jen on back to Foxy.
You mentioned a 60-day mark of some sort. Can you describe what exactly you're expecting at the 60-day mark? What type of work product? What happens after?
Hopefully we'll be able to see trends of how our alignment and our enforcement and our efforts are trending in the right direction. But that's the whole basis of using data to allow us to measure our effectiveness. So I'm just putting a 60-day, meaning a time frame of when you have to set a goal. You have to. And by that 60-day mark, we want to be able to see some trends. But that will be fleshed out as we move along, as we use the data. The data will tell that story.
Well, when do you expect like a set of comprehensive recommendations that can be achieved?
Well, the comprehensive recommendations come as we look at the data daily, right? Interventions happen daily. You don't wait. You use that data daily. That war room type of exercise I spoke about. It's a daily undertaking, and you're able to really strategize, and you're able to focus and be more intentional about how you're deploying your resources, regardless of what those resources are.
So you're not expecting this to culminate in some kind of final report or set of recommendations. These are things that you're.
It could.
You could.
It could, because we're wanting to share. We're wanting to share the information, good, bad, or indifferent. But we know that we have to do something, and we also know a level of coordination, particularly in the members that we're tasking to work on this. We should absolutely see some results, because there are individuals who have a responsibility to keeping and making sure this community stays safe. So that's the good news in all this. Anything to add?
Sure. So Ben, it's a little premature, right? I think the task force now that has been formally established as of right now with the palm of the mayor's signature. When we meet, those are the things that we will discuss. And my goal is to convene the first meeting this week of this task force. So as soon as we leave here is when we're going to start getting schedules together. And because, trust me, as the director of 911 for the city of New Orleans, I understand the 24-hour and how the conditions on the ground change from one community to the next, sometimes by the hour. And so the task force needs to align ourselves and get ourselves set up so we can respond. And so give us a little bit, but the task force will communicate when we have plans, when we have recommendations. Sometimes we make recommendations to the mayor in the middle of the night saying, hey, we think tomorrow we need these three things need to happen. But this is why I think the instrument of executive order is appropriate, because it gives the flexibility to the task force and the mayor to move as the condition on the ground changes.
Okay, last follow-up.
And then we have to move on.
Understood. So the public can expect to hear about progress when on a certain schedule? Like when should we expect to receive some kind of report back as a public?
So we will begin to convene based on the priorities that come out. All the focus is on violent crime. We will have strategies that bubble up from this level of collaboration. And from there will be some built-in accountability metrics for each of those agencies, for example. And so we will share once we have something to share that's worthy of it. And so we'll keep you abreast, every step of the way. But I'm taking this from my page book of dealing with COVID-19. And it guided me and our team every single day. And the results of that, we're living through them right now, proven to be effective. And so this is a part of, like, this is how we're approaching it. Anything you want to add?
Hey, perfect.
Are we still on task force? Moving on. Mayor, the council is considering an ordinance to require parking lot owners and operators to have a live attendant, or cameras, or some sort of security devices in order to help with the car break-ins. We are approaching Mardi Gras, which seems like a candy store for these kids that are doing that kind of stuff. Do you support having the live attendant or some sort of enhanced security at parking lots and garages?
Well, I support enhanced security across the board. Clearly, in parking lots that are privately owned, that are making a tremendous amount of money in our city, and residents and or visitors that utilize them, they should expect that their vehicles are protected and are safe. I know that many of them have cameras and the like. I've actually asked for this data as well, but I'm for enhancing public safety wherever it's needed.
Fox 8.
Mayor, you talk about the task force implementing some strategies after they embed themselves in the communities and find out some answers. Where are we with Fausto Plichardo's recommendations? Some people are critical of the administration and the department for not implementing some of the strategies that were suggested in that outline.
Sure. So what you can say, and what I'm saying actually in terms of the recommendations, we have began to implement them. And so we will continue on that path. So all cannot be done at one time. We all know that, right? And so the most critical ones have. We've started that, and we will continue on that path and trajectory. As we've onboarded our interim superintendent, leadership as well has been shifted, and so we're continuing to take steps every day. We'll continue on that path.
One of the recommendations was the possible consolidation of districts so that more manpower could be centralized into task forces that can go out and target some of these crime hotspots like Mid-City or parking lots.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on consolidating?
What my thoughts are, we're working through that right now. They were recommendations that not only did not just come from Chief Pichardo, they came from leadership within the New Orleans Police Department. Let's be clear on that. And we're working through those recommendations, looking through potentially consolidation, the impacts associated with that, resources that we now have to bear. So it's a perfect time. And